By July of 1117, Velkomorava having been duly conquered, their now unlanded child king fled to Bayern. By September, during the new Kaiser Ruprecht's coronation, the murk and deceit kept in line by his powerful and domineering mother suddenly burst forth. Patriarch Gottschalk, as he was about to lay the crown upon his head, tried to plunge a knife into his ear instead. With this act, he declared war upon him. Ruprecht, however, escaped, aided by the still loyal attending priests of the coronation, who pulled him back from the altar, saving his life. This group had to flee quickly, and all the loyal men in the crowd got to fighting as a caravan of zealous Albigensians who had fled various other countries to help in the foundation of the Holy Kingdom flooded the church, weapons drawn. However, after hours of fighting and a great deal of blood spilled on holy ground, Patriarch Gottschalk fled to an undisclosed monastery from which he carried on the Patriarchate's misguided and ungrateful attempt to form a holy kingdom at the expense of the Volksreich, the very kingdom which essentially gave them life. Meanwhile, in 1118, Aquitaine was formed out of several southern French states. This unification was headed by Gévaudan and the result of a series of strategic marriages. This wouldn't go over well with certain noble families who stood to lose from this arrangement, and so a minor war began almost immediately after its founding. The Aquitaines called this the Fiery Founding. Back in the Volksreich, despite its rather dramatic declaration, the Albigensian Church was swiftly defeated in this war as well, and on the 9th of January 1118, in an attempt to curry favor with the crown and avoid any harsher punishments thereof, the late Kaiserin Sara the Cruel was made a saint for her conquest of Rome. From then to forevermore, she was to be known as Saint Sara the Cruel. To celebrate his victory, Kaiser Ruprecht decided to hold the first grand tournament at Schwarzburg instead of going to church. On the 25th of June, 1119, a daughter was born to Ruprecht, named Sophia. On the 11th of May, 1121, just as Kaiser Ruprecht launched a campaign to shore up the borders of the Volksreich through minor wars, he had a revelation. Narrowly escaping death when an arrow pierced his left ear, he reevaluated his faith once the first of his minor wars was complete. He then declared that if the Patriarch and his church would not guide him or his people, then he should seek solace in the Lord himself, living a life of celibacy in honor of the Lord, and cutting out any self-proclaimed conduits to God. He underwent a personal consolamentum at the age of 27, conducted by those attending priests who saved him, thus securing the throne for his daughter and only child, Sophia. Soon thereafter, he would turn his attention inwards, towards the development and well-being of the Volksreich. For his adept administration of the Volksreich, Kaiser Ruprecht earned the title of the Wise. In 1136, due to a noted lack of plague and a series of good harvests, Kaiser Ruprecht launched a campaign to develop the Volksreich in strategic areas, building new cities, castles, and churches from Rome to Schwarzburg, emptying the treasury to do so. He was exceedingly confident in the security of his investment. Regardless of their real efficacy, the castles he would build would ultimately make up the bulk of medieval period fortifications in northern Europe. In September of 1127, Ruprecht devised a trade mission in order to bring back exotic goods and recoup his losses made by building up the Volksreich. During this time, to the southeast, Basileus Antonios Doxapatres had proven himself to be such an effective ruler of the Byzantine Empire that some whispers had reached the court that he may even restore the glory of Rome itself. His most notable feat was the total conquest of Slavonia, which was once total master of the Adriatic. Meanwhile, Ruprecht's expedition went east to Chernigov and gifted them with 12 strong horses. The expedition was a wild success, filling the coffers of the Volksreich once more. On the 14th of February, 1130, a little-known monk was rewarded for his kindness in life and was made Saint Emmicho the Amiable. This dedication, however, was one of the humblest sort yet, because of the Church's past aggression with the Kaisers and resultant lack of funds. On the 20th of January 1133, Patriarch Gottschalk, restless and bloodthirsty, declared yet another war upon the Volksreich, trying to carve out his holy kingdom at all costs. This war was minor and defeated by July, resulting in the Patriarch's imprisonment in the Cathedral of St. Reiner the Zealot. This practice was becoming so common at this point that the people joked about that particular cathedral, calling it the Church of the Traitors' Tithing. On the 26th of September, Kaiser Ruprecht the Wise began his support of a guild system throughout the Volksreich, helping the common man to lift himself up and learn a skill with a community to help him do so. On the 16th of May, 1136, Patriarch Gottschalk declared the Fifth Albigensian Crusade for Kiev. Not necessarily interested in the holy aspects, but desiring an Albigensian ally to the east, Kaiser Ruprecht joined in the crusade against his best judgment. 26,000 men were raised, and soundly defeated 19,000 pagans at the Battle of Chernobyl. The crusade for Kiev ended on the 4th of June 1138 and was a resounding success, resulting in King Vasily Knyazov of Kiev converting to the Albigensian faith. This also resulted in the shattering of Prussia, giving rise to the Kingdom of Lietuvia once again from many of its central provinces. In 1139, the Fatimids, long stable and famously silent on the world stage, declared a new jihad, targeting various African territories. They also formed the group known as the Arsia to fight for the cause of Islam. To the shock of all Europe, on the 20th of November 1139, the Byzantine Empire fell again, shattering Anatolia into a myriad of warring states, leaving it open to conquest. There was much speculation as to how the great Basileus Antonios could fail in his duties to preserve the Roman flame, but to those within the Byzantine realm, it was clear. Antonios was prolific in his fatherhood, fathering dozens and, by some accounts, well over 100 children. A cabal of about 6 of his eldest sons worked in secret unison, inheriting their father's statesmanship, and led several rebellions at once, which the throne was unable to handle. Many of these sons would not hold their positions either, and chaos soon ensued. In 1140, a monument to Kaiser Ruprecht the Wise was built in thanks for the capital's prosperity, which Ruprecht didn't want but was ultimately thankful for. In the east, the Seljuks declared themselves an empire, threatening the Fatimids. Despite their limited geographic size, they had been laboring for centuries to fulfill what they felt was their stolen destiny. The Ghaznavids actively worked against them, as they always had, which is why such an endeavor took centuries in the first place. In 1142, another saint was canonized, a local town official who was fair to the poor, known as Saint Willeburg the Just. But her canonization was also without much fanfare due to the plummeting popularity of the church. In 1143, the African faithful declared their own holy war against the Ptolemy Sultanate, hoping to graft in more territory to defend against the incoming Fatimids. In response, the Muslims formed another jihadist group, the Haruya. In 1144, Prussia became whole again, subsuming Lietuvia once more. By December of that year, Patriarch Minnah became the new Albigensian matriarch. She almost immediately died and was succeeded by Patriarch Stoignew. He too died within a couple years and was succeeded by Patriarch Anshelm. In a ridiculous move, Patriarch Anshelm declared the late Patriarch Stoignew a saint, known as Saint Stoignew the Wise. There was no fanfare for this odd saint. In 1144, Patriarch Anshelm died and was succeeded by Patriarch Welf. Many began to rumor that the seat of the Patriarch was cursed, perhaps by God for the treacherous actions of the supposedly holy institution. Anhelm was made a saint, called the Pious. The only celebrant of this was Patriarch Welf, hoping his successor would do the same for him. By 1147, Prussia fell apart again, Lietuvia not content to disappear any longer. In November of 1150, as a bout of consumption spread to Schwarzburg, Kaiser Ruprecht the Wise shut his gates in order to protect himself from the sickness. In December of that year, a daughter was born to Tanist Sophia named Alice. In 1151, Sophia fell ill with the flu. In 1152, the 58-year-old Kaiser began to feel fatigued and lost his fighting skill. Soon, fever followed. The worst had befallen him, and despite his best efforts, Kaiser Ruprecht had contracted consumption. His physician cut off his leg in an attempt to cure his illness and balance the humors, but it did nothing. As a matter of fact, he died of that very injury on the 11th of May, 1152. His daughter, Kaiserin Sophia, ascended to the throne at the age of 32. On the 20th of July, 1154, a new house of Christianity entered the spiritual realm. After the Manichaean Archegos was murdered by the Caliph in Baghdad centuries ago, many thought that was the end of the religion as an organized church. But like a phoenix rising from its ashes, Archegos Shirivmandai has been proclaimed the new Archegos by Khan Tolun of the Ayyid Khanate, with the Manichaean faith having enough power now to make him no mere charlatan. Soon afterwards, with the Army of Light behind him, Khan Tolun formed an empire and earned the title of the Tormentor. In 1155, the church declared a new saint, Saint Ivo the Righteous, whose very existence as a noble farmhand who died for his father's sake was dubious. By 1157, Prussia fell into its constituent provinces and was no more. On July 31st of that year, Patriarch Welf declared war upon Kaiserin Sophia, as had seemed to be tradition at this point. The war was frantic but short, and it was over by February. Patriarch Welf said it was to escape the Volksreich as quickly as possible, as their reputation as the Church of the land was forever tarnished. As punishment, the Church's power to appoint bishops was revoked, and free investiture was signed into law by decree. Patriarch Welf was, however, able to force the hand of the King of Kiev to grant him land upon which to finally found his holy kingdom, which he moved to and called the Cathar Patriarchy. Kaiserin Sophia immediately declared war on his kingdom to teach him what her grandmother Sara taught the Church, that the crown rules on earth, and the Church may leave for their holy kingdom in heaven if they so wish to have one. In 1160, on the British Isles, the Empire of Deheubarth was founded, the first major power on those long fractured islands for centuries. Meanwhile, due to these actions, a messenger was sent from the Albigensian Church, stating that Kaiserin Sophia is anathema to all that is holy, and that she has been excommunicated. The same crown that gave those fringe heretics the very church from which they jostle for power had been excommunicated. By 1164, Kaiserin Sophia, after a particularly bad illness, lost an eye, but recovered soon thereafter. By 1166, new saints stopped being recorded by the Imperial Chronicle due to the treachery of the Church, which had made itself foreign to the Volksreich. To the east, in 1169, the Kingdom of Hereti was declared an empire by Arshak The Bold, carrying on the torch of the Orthodox Church where the Byzantines left off, this time beneath the heretical apostolic banner. In 1171, Sophia began building a tower in Schwarzburg, deliberately taller than any church in the realm, as a direct affront to the Albigensian Patriarchate. In 1173, rumors of a pestilence reached the Volksreich. People were beginning to die by the thousands of the Fatimid Empire, the same place it emerged from last. Many called it a new plague. In 1174, again to the east, a kingdom of Greek Muslims called Lakando was declared an empire by the new Basileus Solomon Adamos. Though he had no regard for his Greek ancestry, his title was indeed backed up by the power he held. With no Byzantium to hold him back, there was no telling how far into Europe he could ravage. In 1176, Kaiserin Sophia was passing through a path where children were playing and was hit in her good eye with a rock, rendering her totally blind. By May, the plague caused the collapse of the Lakando threat, proof to Christendom that this pestilence was indeed perhaps divine. On the 21st of July, 1176, Kaiserin Sophia died at the age of 57 due to the physical stress of that most recent injury to her remaining eye. Kaiserin Alice rose to the throne at the age of 25. Kaiserin Alice began her rule by increasing crown authority in order to crack down on corruption, and setting her eyes upon the fractured territory where Prussia once stood. In 1178, Kaiserin Alice suffered a severe illness which required surgery, and the removal of masses of infected tissue from her face, causing her to be cured indeed, but awfully disfigured. She then took up an ivory mask to conceal her injuries and strike fear into her enemies.